And just like that, we've reached episode number 3. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Welcome back to everyone. Welcome back to Viewpoint, the Brian Heeraman podcast. It's always good to have you all tuning in. It's always good to know that you all are tuning in, not just to episode number 3, but to episode number 1 and 2 as well. So, I want to start by saying that the podcast is now available on YouTube and it's also available on Spotify. So, that's two new platforms for your listening pleasure. Share the link, tell your friends about the podcast. There are more avenues now so that they can listen to the podcast as well. So I want to continue by saying I want to thank some people who have provided a lot of feedback to the podcast. I want to thank Ramona. I want to thank Laurie, Avita, Cindy, Kay. You know, these ladies have provided tremendous feedback. So you can expect I'll be taking their opinions and I would be taking their points as well. So the content and the quality will improve definitely. So I want to thank them a lot. I want to also thank my brother Shane, who's always here providing positive feedback and assisting wherever he can. And I also want to thank Corey. As you all know, Corey has his own podcast. It's the Corey Shepherd Bar podcast. He's on YouTube, he's on Spotify, and he's also on Google as well. So you guys can look for his podcast and give him a listen. Corey and I go way back. He's been my friend since in University of the West Indies, and he's been a good support of my podcast. So you all should go and listen to him. It's good stuff. I mean, Corey podcast is better than it's better than how he plays golf. Let me put it to you that way. I mean, Corey finds the fairway in golf often as hmm as often as West Indies would win a cricket match. Yeah, that's how often Corey finds the fairway when he's playing golf. He's not a good golfer, but his podcast, oh yeah, definitely good. Check it out. Give him a listen. You'll have no regrets. Right. On my last podcast, I wanted to talk about Guyana, but I didn't get the opportunity to go on to it. So in this podcast, I want to continue where I left off in Guyana. You know, Guyana, like I mentioned before, it's a gift that keeps on giving. You can't make the stuff up that goes on in Guyana right now. Even if you have the most wild imagination ever, you can't make the stuff up that goes on in Guyana. It's beyond our simple mind. So when we last stopped discussing Guyana, we had reached a point where the the Caribbean Court of Justice was going to issue a ruling as it pertains to the CEO of GCOM, his report that he had submitted. And the CCJ did provide their ruling, and basically they shut down his report and said that how, your report, the Court of Appeal giving you this opinion, no, they don't have the jurisdiction. We have the jurisdiction. And they struck out a report and they sent you back to go and get a new report. Now, that's what you were supposed to go and do. So you're supposed to go back and issue a new report. And in issuing this new report, oh my God, this thing takes so many days. I mean, but starting off on July the 10th when the CEO was supposed to submit a new report. Instead of submitting a new report, he went and he seek clarification from the GCOM chairwoman. After he was given the clarification, he was supposed to go back on July 11th to submit a new report, which he did not do. And then on the 13th of July, he was supposed to submit another new report, but instead of submitting the report as per the recount figures, he submitted a report on the basis of the March 13 figures, which is the figures that were submitted after the March 2nd election. Now you have to remember, Guyana has been going on for over 4 months now without any new government being sworn in. So it's crazy. Um, so on Tuesday the 14th, when he went back to submit another report, he just there was no quorum, so he couldn't submit anything. So and on the 14th as well, because of the fact that there was no quorum, what happened was amazing. Another court action was filed. Oh yeah, Guyana is a country with limitless court actions when it comes to this results, this election. As fast as the ruling party doesn't like a decision of the court, they file the next one time to prevent the the recount figures from being used as the new figures for this swearing of a government because they don't like the recount figures. This government, in because this caretaker government, they don't like the recount figures. The recount figures clearly shows that they have lost the election, so they don't want the recount figures to be used at any point in time. The opposition party wants the recount figures to be used, and I think rightfully so because GCOM, as well as other stakeholders, verify those recount figures. So those are the figures. OAS was present, CARICOM was present, GCOM signed off on it, other political parties were present, and they all agree with the figures. So to say up and now you don't want to use these recount figures, I have a serious problem with that. The recount figures is the figures that they should go with. But on the 14th of July, the ruling government, the caretaker government, utilizing its political support, filed another motion in the High Court seeking to have the figures of the recount thrown out again. But, like I said, that is not the major issue taking place in Guyana right now. What the major issue taking place in Guyana right now is what happened once that court action was filed on July the 14th. You see, as I mentioned earlier, this whole election chaos has been going on for over 4 months now. It's been going on for over 4 months, whereby the international community has been telling the ruling party it's time to move forward with the recount figures. It's time to step aside. But no, as with everything else, power seems to corrupt everything. So right after this court action was filed in the 14th, the United States government said, you know what, we have enough. We have had enough of trying to get this situation settled, and they have imposed sanctions on Guyana now. So the Guyana ruling party, as well as anyone else in the United States' mind who is subverting the will of the people of Guyana, they are now going to be sanctioned. Now, they didn't call any names, but I suspect that it's going to be Granger, possibly even the CEO of GCOM, and I don't know who else, but sanctions are sanctions regardless of what. And we know what sanctions mean. It's not going to be something beneficial for Guyana in the short term, the medium term, or the long term. You see, when your country has sanctions on you, the implications are real. It's real for trade, it's real for investment, it's real for visas. All of these things is going to start to be affected, if not immediately. What you're going to see, you're going to start happening now. You're going to start, if Granger continues to go down this rabbit hole, and I suspect he's going to continue to go down this rabbit hole. And the reason why I say that is because if he reverse course and he doesn't pursue the avenue that he's carrying on, and he allows the PPP to be sworn in based on the recount figures, then he knows he has nothing to get. If he continues going down the rabbit hole, this rabbit hole has no end. He doesn't even know where it's going to end up, but he knows he's better off there than anywhere else. But he's not seeing the bigger picture because the sanctions is the problem. You see, as I mentioned earlier, if he continues to go down this rabbit hole, soon he's going to find that his government officials, when he opens back his borders and the borders across the world starts opening back, they won't be allowed to travel. Their visas will be removed. They'll be revoked. And countries that allow him to travel, which is going to be very limited because once the world's largest economy, United States, puts sanctions on you, the allies tend to follow. Where are you going to go? I wonder if he's going to be allowed to travel in CARICOM. Is CARICOM going to be allowing him to travel? Which any countries allow Granger to travel after they revoke his visa and prevent him from traveling to the United States and other first world countries. They themselves then put themselves at risk of being sanctioned as well because they're allowing somebody who's a dictator traveling to their country who is not in favor with the United States and their allies. You've seen what's happening with regards to this whole Delcy Rodriguez landing in Trinidad, a matter that's currently under investigation by the United States, and we don't know where that's going to end up. But on that issue, which I discussed about as already, I don't think we're going to like what's going to come out of that. But we're not dealing with that today. What we're dealing with is the Guyana election issue. So you see, if he allows if he continues down this path, it's not just going to be visa; it's going to be investment. You see, no country, no multinational organization is going to invest in Guyana because Guyana is now under sanctions with the United States, and soon the allies of the United States are going to impose sanctions because the UK, Canada, as well as the European Union have already indicated their intention to impose sanctions. You can imagine a huge company wanting to do business in Guyana having their funds trapped in Guyana. No, they're not going to do that. And even if they were even thinking about doing that, they themselves would become at risk of being sanctioned as well. They're not going to risk their reputation just to invest in Guyana. No, it's not going to happen. And Granger, if he continues, and I keep saying that because if he continues, he may very well find if he persistent in this crazy idea that he has that at some point in time he's going to become the president again of Guyana, regardless of the recount figures, he may very well find himself being not just himself, but the entire Guyana being locked out of the banking system of the world. And it's not just going to affect him, it's going to affect the people of Guyana. And while I mention the people of Guyana, they should be commended for what they've endured so far. It's 4 months, and they have not, in any significant way, rioted or there's no civil unrest. They have shown extreme patience throughout this entire scenario, this entire chaos, and they should be commended for that. So I want to commend the Guyanese people for that. But at the same time, I want to warn Granger and all of his what is it supporters that the path that they're on doesn't end well. There's no good way to say that. It doesn't end well. It only ends in suffering, not just for your supporters, but for the whole of Guyana. You're putting CARICOM in the spotlight of first world nations, and it's not in a good spotlight. It's in a horrible spotlight, and it's not something that we need at this point in time. So I know where this new chairman of CARICOM stands. He has said without a doubt that Granger needs to step aside. So that's good. I'm still waiting for the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago to state his position clear because he tends to want to think on his own. So I don't know if he's supporting CARICOM in this regard. As I mentioned before, he supports Maduro. So I really want to hear what he thinks about Granger. If he's supporting Granger, if he's not supporting Granger. So I wait to hear what his response is going to be on that. But like I said, let's stay focused on Guyana. And you all may wondering why I'm going so fast to say in Guyana, maybe locked out of the banking system, their visas restricted. But I've seen it happen, and you've seen it happen before. You just haven't recognized or put it together yet. So let me try and say something in that regard. And the way how I see it, I look at the Hong Kong China issue, what's going on with them right now. Now, as you know, in July 1997, the Britain gave back Hong Kong to China and allowed them to continue to manage Hong Kong, but they were not allowed to interfere with Hong Kong for the next 50 years. But lo and behold, China decided to pass this secret law. And this secret law came about because there were protests going on in Hong Kong, whereby the Hong Kong nationals were calling for democracy and to separate themselves from China, because China wanted to have citizens who they charged to be tried in Chinese courts in mainland Beijing. And the Hong Kong people were not quite comfortable with that. They were accustomed being ruled by the British, by democracy. You see, Hong Kong is a democracy that maintains its economic system as it relates to Britain. They don't deal with this communist type thing that China is trying to impose on them. So lo and behold, Hong China now, sorry, China passed this new measure and drafted a secret bill that they say would end protests and make Hong Kong stable and harmonious again. No, that's what China said. China said stable and harmonious. Now for some of us, that's a joke. How could China use the word stable and harmonious? It doesn't exist in the Chinese the Chinese official, the Communist Party mind. I mean, no, let me say from the outside, China is not something you can discuss in part of a podcast. That's an entire podcast on its own. But I want to use this to show an example of something. We get into it. You see, the legislation that they drafted have said that how it defines harm to government property as subversive, and it can result in life imprisonment. So you paint a statue and you may go to prison for life. Even Donald Trump said 10 years. He didn't say life imprisonment. But anyhow, China says life imprisonment. You all know China has appalling human rights record. And detainees under this new law could be held for 6 months with no lawyers, no communication, nothing. And the law goes on to say that foreigners too could face penalties if they support sanctions against China or call for the independence of Hong Kong. Now you think about it. Which first world nation, would it be Canada, would it be Germany, England, which first world nation would sit idly by and allow such such a draconian piece of legislation to take effect and not say anything about it? So America now has decided, you know what? They're not gonna, as Secretary Mike Pompeo would have said, he said they're not gonna stand idly by while China swallows up Hong Kong into this communist type system. So before this entire scenario, one needs to remember that Hong Kong had the privilege and the preferential treatment as it relates to trade and other banking systems, because Hong Kong was always thought to be separate from China, and not in terms of the mainland per se, but separate in terms of the economic system that they manage was separate from the communist system. So they were allowed preferential trade treatment. But now that China is now exerting this amount of influence and authority over Hong Kong, within the 50 years, America is now saying, you know what, we're going to take that away. So they've passed legislation taking away those privileges from Hong Kong. Obviously, China is not happy, but that's the reality. They've passed the legislation and they remove Hong Kong privileges. So now they have no more privileges as it regards to trade and that sort of thing. That's the Hong Kong China scenario. That's what happens when first world countries don't support measures that are not genuine and is not in the interest of the people. That's what the United States did to Hong Kong. Bring it back to the Caribbean. What do you think they're going to do to Guyana? Now, Guyana may have all of its amount of oil in the ground, this pot of gold. What do you think is going to happen? Sanctions is definitely going to come. You just have to bring these scenarios back home. And that's what you see is going to happen. As I mentioned, Guyana may have this pot of gold, but they just standing in the middle of a desert with this pot of gold with nowhere to sell it to. This oil with nowhere to sell it to. They may think about bringing it and trying to sell it to Russia or China. But I can tell you one thing, America is not going to sit idly by and have communist powers at their back door. It was tried with Cuba, and we all know what happened with that. So it's a bad scenario that Granger is forcing Guyana to go under. And I hope you'd allow before before sanctions become too too much of a pressure on not just himself but the people of Guyana. I hope that he will allow good sense to prevail and move away and start something fresh. Just step aside and let the will of the Guyanese people prevail. I hope so. As I mentioned in my last podcast, and I want to go back there, I I'm seeing where the borders remain closed for nationals of Trinidad and Tobago, but CPL is now being allowed to come in. Now, how could we even think that could be right? How could you allow CPL to come in and have cricket in Trinidad and Tobago when other countries in the Caribbean said that they don't want it, they can't handle it? But Trinidad and Tobago has CPL. You're spending $1 million to bring in CPL cricket in Trinidad and Tobago, but you can't bring in your nationals. I don't understand why would you want to spend $1 million US on CPL, but you wouldn't take that same $1 million to ensure that your nationals are brought home. What's more important, your nationals or CPL cricket? It's I don't know. You see, as I mentioned in my initial podcast, the double standard is the double standards that result in all these conflict situations. Because the rule that you use for one, you don't want to use across the board, and that's what breeds the distrust and the disloyalty. Rules for one should be rules for all. You can't have CPL coming into Trinidad and Tobago, but you have your nationals begging to come home, and you refuse to give them permission to come in. It doesn't it doesn't look good. It's not right, and it shouldn't be allowed to happen. That's what I want to say on CPR. And I'm going to go further as it relates to COVID-19 and this whole situation. Now, COVID-19, they say the incubation period for COVID-19 is like 14 days. Now, Trinidad and Tobago has had no new cases of COVID-19 except for returning nationals for more than 14 days. So basically, if we were to go by this 14-day period thing, then we would say that our Trinidad and Tobago has no COVID-19 except what comes in from international or from regional. But lo and behold, the restrictions are still there to some extent. Only recently they allowed bars to start back opening from 10 o'clock up until 10 o'clock again. But why is the restriction still there? If you're saying that you have no new virus as it relates to this 14-day incubation period, no new virus besides that what's coming out from outside, I don't understand why the restrictions are still there. Shouldn't things return to normal because you have no virus unless it comes from outside? And if you manage those who come in from outside effectively, then you should have no virus to be spread. But this is what I'm thinking and why they don't want to remove the restrictions. You see, you listen to the United States and you hear about 60,000 cases a day and how many millions of people infected and all that. You know why? Because they're doing something that we're not doing. It's called testing. They are testing people on a mass scale. The more you test, it's obvious, the more virus detection you would have. Ask yourself, given the population size of Trinidad and Tobago since this COVID-19 started, how much tests have they done? And how many tests are they doing per day to find out the extent of the COVID-19 problem? If you're not testing, then you don't know where the curve is. If the curve is flat, if the curve is bell shaped, you don't know where the curve is because you're not testing. And that is the reason why I believe they don't want to remove the restrictions completely. You're not testing. You don't know whether you could be sitting down next to somebody at any point in time and they could have COVID-19, but you wouldn't know. You have public transportation back to 100%, but you want to shut down bars. So how is it? What is the rationale? I mean, so you could get COVID-19 from being in a bar, but you can't get COVID-19 from traveling in a full maxi taxi. Doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. These are some of the things that we need to start to consider. You see, you can't have public policy implemented and suggested that just doesn't make sense. It's questionable, and we need to start questioning these type of policies. Is either the incubation for COVID-19 is beyond 14 days or it's not? And if it is 14 days, then we could clearly say that there is no COVID-19 in Trinidad besides that which comes from international and regional returning of citizens. So I want to leave you on that note to think about what's going on with this entire COVID-19 situation as it relates to the lockdown of sorts that continues in certain areas of Trinidad and Tobago. The gathering is still 25. Now it's campaigning time, and there's virtual campaigning now because they don't want you to just get spread from COVID-19. And I do understand that it's 25 people, but what COVID-19? Where is the COVID-19 coming from? If it's not there, then it can't come from anywhere, unless you are admitting in some secret way that you yourself are not sure where the COVID-19 is. the extent of the COVID-19 outside, then I don't understand it. In any event, folks, on my next episode, I hope to deal with something that's been bugging me as it relates to media bias. I didn't get to it at this point in time, but I want to keep my word to you and not have this podcast go too long. So, stay tuned to episode number 4. As always, thanks for tuning in.